Tonight on Bridge City News, the owner of the trucking company involved in the Humboldt Broncos bus crash pleaded guilty to safety charges today. Premier Rachel Notley says her NDP government has a plan to reduce surgery wait times. We have the details. And UCP leader Jason Kenney says if he's elected premier, he would double the amount of schools offering vocational training. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The owner of the trucking company involved in last April's deadly Humboldt Broncos bus crash has pleaded guilty to safety charges. A lawyer for Sukhminder Singh of the now defunct Adeshtiol Trucking said his client pleaded guilty in a Calgary court today to 5 of the 8 charges. That added up to a $5,000 fine. Charges include failing to maintain time logs for drivers, neglecting to ensure his drivers complied with safety regulations, and not having or following a written safety program. Court documents show the offenses occurred between January and the end of March of last year. 16 people died and 13 others were injured in the April 6th bus crash. The driver, Jaspreet Singh Sidhu, was sentenced on Friday to 8 years in prison on 29 dangerous driving charges. Alan Nelson is a trucker with CJD Trucking in Coaldale. He says it's about time that his industry is held accountable and that it is good that new trucking regulations have now been implemented to make our roads safer for everyone.
So much negative publicity over this whole situation, and I mean it's such a terrible situation, and it does impact the trucking industry. You know, we need to pick up the gauntlet, so to speak, and train our people better. You know, there's a lot of us that do a good job at that already, but there's always room for improvement. So I think I like to see some of the new training guidelines that are coming out from the government. So I'd like to see those adhered to.
The new rules include a standardized curriculum taught in all driver training schools. Drivers will also need 121.5 hours of training before they're able to take a test to get a Class 1 trucking license. A 38-year-old Lethbridge woman has been charged with defrauding her employer. Melanie Dawn Valencourt is charged with internal fraud for stealing more than $40,000 from her employer, the King of Trade. The theft includes $46,000 in cash and $1,500 worth of property. The investigation revealed that the money and goods were stolen over a 20-month period beginning in April of 2017. Valencourt faces numerous charges including fraud, theft, and falsification of documents. She's scheduled to appear in court on April the 12th. You may have noticed that the price of gas has gone up again, and it'll be going up even more. To talk about when that may be happening and the reason behind it, the petrol increase, is Dan McTagg from GasBuddy.com. He joins me via Skype. Dan, we went from $1.08 a litre to $1.21 a litre in Lethbridge. Could we see another increase? And if so, how much?
Yeah, Hal, I'm thinking this is probably as much as we're going to see for the next week or so. Prices will stabilize on the Chicago spot market. That's really the trendsetter for the prices we pay across Western Canada. I'm a gas station owner. It really doesn't matter anywhere throughout Southern Alberta. It's costing me about roughly $1.11 to buy my gasoline. Now, some large players get much more generous discounts. In some instances, you might see them getting 4 or 5 cent advantages over other gas stations. But generally speaking, the big shift that you're seeing is from $1.11 all the way to $1.21. That represents the retail margin. And we see in many cities, sometimes that 10-cent margin gets compressed by the evening, only to go back up the next morning. Very frustrating for drivers, but there's a simple solution: simply buy in the evenings.
What about the prices in the bigger markets like Calgary and Edmonton?
Yeah, well, Calgary, we're looking at prices as low as $1.04, $1.05. Those are Costco's and other big discount stores that are selling gasoline below cost. They're likely to move upwards towards the $1.14 range. They're heading to $1.21 as well in many instances. Edmonton, way up there at $1.19. There is about a 2-cent difference on the wholesale side between the two.
Where are some of the highest prices in Canada?
Well, the only one that stands out other than Victoria is Vancouver. $1.57.9, but in about book at 12 hours, there'll be $1.59.9. So I'd mentioned last week to many stations it'd be $1.60 pretty soon. If that doesn't move, and it's not likely to go up or down, then the provincial government's additional carbon tax there will make it $1.60, $1.61 by the stroke of midnight. So on Sunday.
How much of an election issue will the carbon tax be as we head to the polls?
From what I understand, the UCP in your province will be proposing to cut the tax, the carbon tax, That, if it's passed, if they are successful, would mean an immediate drop of 7.1 cents a liter. And we saw this happen last year in Ontario. Many, I guess, among the chattering classes thought it wasn't a great idea and didn't think it was going to happen. But the Doug Ford government was elected in the province of Ontario, and scrapping the carbon tax. By September, everyone in Ontario saw a 5 cent a liter decrease. And they've been enjoying that for the past 7-8 months. But again, come Sunday, what provincial government has done, what a new government has done, will be taken away by Ottawa. That is obviously intended on ensuring that the price of fuel rises.
Dan McTagg with GasBuddy.com. Thanks a lot for your time today.
Hal, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
The carbon tax on Alberta businesses is an election issue, and many people have differing opinions. With the election so close, Ainsley O'Reilly explains both sides of a conversation that has divided so many Albertans.
Since the carbon tax has been introduced 2 years ago, it's pulled in $2 billion for local green projects across the province. Many business owners in Lethbridge have strong opinions on the tax.
First off, on the record, I am against carbon tax.
It's an issue on the minds of many as the April 16th provincial election approaches. The NDP insists that the tax is working to reduce Alberta's carbon footprint, while UCP leader Jason Kenney says that as soon as he's elected, the tax will be tossed. Owner of Lethbridge Fasteners and Tools is questioning exactly where his money is going.
Why and where is it going? That's my biggest question. And who is administrating and what is the cost of administration? Somebody please tell us where these taxes are going. And don't call it a carbon levy, it's a tax. It's the public that's paying it. They say corporations pay it. No, it's the public. It ends up being the public that pays it all. There are some big polluters, and certainly oil sands are one of the biggest polluters out there. There are big polluters. Convince them to reduce their pollution, improve the trucking industry so that they're not just running to delivering with big trucks all the time.
On the contrary, some people say we just need to trust the process.
Yeah, you kind of have to take their word for that they're going to reinvest it into towns and cities and into green projects, because whether you believe it or not, like, climate change is a threat. We have used fossil fuels in the last, since the industrial age. We've done some just damage to our planet.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The provincial election is just over 3 weeks away, and tonight is the first of the city's provincial election forums. Candidates in the Lethbridge East constituency have been invited to take part tonight, 6:30 p.m. at the Royal Canadian Legion. Candidates will make presentations and take questions from the floor. It's being sponsored by SACPA. A second forum will take place on Friday and will feature Lethbridge West candidates. It'll take place 6:30 p.m. at the Fritz Sick Centre. Premier Rachel Notley says if her government is re-elected, they will spend an extra $90 million a year on health care to further reduce surgery wait times. Notley says with the NDP plan, close to 40,000 Albertans would get faster cancer, open heart, and cataract surgeries over the next few years. She says the NDP would continue to fund specialized EMS liaison teams to care for those in emergency wards so ambulance crews can return to the streets quicker. UCP leader Jason Kenney says his party will not cut healthcare spending, but would reduce administrative overlap and explore private care options to help improve wait times. Now, speaking of Mr. Kenney, the UCP leader says he will expand education in the skilled trades if he becomes premier. Kenney says apprenticeship learning is just as important as academic education. He says the UCP government would double the number of schools offering vocational training, increase courses from 500 to 1,000, and quadruple the number of students placed with employers. Kenney says his party would create a trade scholarship program which would allow tradespeople to teach in a classroom. He says provincial projections estimate that 3,000 skilled workers will retire each year from now until the year 2025. Recent stats say Canada exports 75% of its canola. Our biggest trading partner in that regard has been China, but not lately with the recent Chinese ban on Canadian canola. Beijing says they've detected several hazardous organisms in recent Canadian canola shipments from both Winnipeg and Regina. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, says Ottawa needs to solve this canola problem with China soon since it's impacting thousands of Canadian farmers' jobs.
We've got about 46,000 farmers growing canola, 250,000 direct and indirect jobs related to this. This makes the possibility of losing SNC-Lavalin look like a Sunday picnic. I mean, there's no comparison at all. And yet, all Justin Trudeau is saying, well, we may send a high-level delegation to Beijing to talk to them about this.
Catch my full interview with Mr. Lilly discussing the Chinese-Canadian canola issue coming up after business news. Police say the safe return of a Chinese international student is just the latest development in what they are calling a relentless investigation. 22-year-old Wan Zhenlu was found safe last night in Gravenhurst, Ontario. That's more than 150 kilometers away from Markham, Ontario, where he was allegedly forced into a van on Saturday night. Lou was checked over in hospital before sitting down with police and reconnecting with his anxious family who flew in from China after his disappearance. They're a nuisance and can cause quite a bit of damage. Potholes. As the snow melts, we see them everywhere. But just how bad will this pothole season be in our city?
The frost raises up that asphalt and there's a bit of a bump, and sometimes there's a void created, and that's where, when it melts, every day it's freezing and thawing, then that pothole, the asphalt fails, and then there's a void in the asphalt, and then cars will hit that void, and that's what a pothole is. It's a small road failure. Every year we track our pothole, the costs we're spending on pothole. I cannot answer how many potholes we fill in, thousands of them, but we track all the dollars spent on potholes. 2018, we spent about $485,000 per year, which is about typical. Usually we're spending about $450,000 to $500,000 per year just on pothole filling. Right now, unless the weather turns bad, that crew is basically from morning until the end of the shift. They're doing nothing but pothole filling.
Although Lethbridge rated high in cost effectiveness, Jewell says that he does not like to compare our city with others around Alberta due to the difference in weather patterns. So what stresses you out? Potholes, your kids, your job? Gordon College is a certified life coach practitioner. He explains how we should handle stress when life throws us a curveball or we hit a pothole.
It's how we react and respond to it. And again, some people internalize so that they just got that nasty phone call, or they just got something that's got them off their game plan. And so when that occurs, they'll take it in and they brood on it, ruminate on it, go round and round and over. And each time they do that, they move closer to becoming quite irritated, quite upset, because it's coming through their fear.
Watch the full interview with Mr. College discussing the best ways to deal with stress coming up in the second half of our show. People in Prince Edward Island will be going to the polls on April the 23rd. Premier Wade McLaughlin made the announcement late last night. Despite a booming economy on the island, polls suggest the governing Liberal Party is in for a rough ride. McLaughlin, however, remains cautiously optimistic.
We're entirely confident that our record, our team, leadership, and the vision that we're laying out, not just for the next 4 years, but for future generations, is what Islanders want, what Islanders will choose, and we're happy to go into a campaign with that and to look for their support. Really what we'll be doing through the course of the campaign is laying out the elements of what will be a budget that we'll take to the legislature following an election and implement it.
Authorities in Florida say a fire at a power utility substation left thousands of people in Broward County without power on Tuesday night. The local utility company says as many as 33,700 homes and businesses were without power. An investigation into what caused the fire is still ongoing. It was brought under control by local fire agencies, and there were no reports of any injuries. Drones have been used by realtors, police, and now the healthcare industry. A pioneering use of drones to fly blood samples across a North Carolina hospital campus in the latest move to expand their roles in business and healthcare.
It's very common for us to have to wait several hours to transport a lab sample across from one of our facilities back to our main lab. And this technology, and so obviously that delays the result of that lab sample, so it delays care of the patient. And that's the standard right now in the industry. This technology can potentially shorten that down to minutes, and the benefits to our patients are clear. We can get them a result faster, and that helps our people take care of the patients much more efficiently.
M231 inside, I have command.
From the time a treatment is given or a sample is drawn, a blood and lab specimen sample is drawn, it can take upwards in a courier network 1 to 2 hours for that to be tested. And that's time that the doctors and the clinicians can use that information once tested to provide better care and patient care access. We believe that the drone technology provides a clear route for better effectiveness and efficiency as a solution for hospitals and clinical lab networks within the hospital environment.
Millions of British people have weighed in on the Brexit debate. Should the UK leave the European Union? You can now include award-winning singer Sting, who's spoken out. He hopes that Brexit will go away, adding he wants England to remain as part of the EU and that leaving would be insane.
My hopes for Brexit is that it will go away. I haven't heard one coherent reason why it's a good idea. And there are so many reasons why we should not do it. So 2 days ago I signed a petition for Parliament to revoke it, or at least debate revoking it, because it will be a disaster. And I'm a very patriotic Englishman, British man, and I want us to be part of Europe. We have to be. It's insane.
Always nice to hear from Sting. We had light showers off and on today and a little bit cooler, but the sunshine should return tomorrow. Complete weather details are on deck. It was mainly overcast today with some light shower activity. Tonight, clearing with a low near -3. Mainly sunny tomorrow with a high near 7 expected. Friday warming up slightly to 9. A beautiful weekend is shaping up. Saturday and Sunday, lots of sunshine and a high of 14 both days. Monday, the clouds return and the mercury will drop to 8 degrees, increasing slightly on Tuesday to 10. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 8 and an average low of -5. The highest temperature of the state was recorded in 1986 at 22 degrees, and the record low was -24 in 1965. Sunrise was at 7:20, sunset at 7:54. Let's have a look at how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Just a few clouds and 13 for Victoria. Pretty much the same picture in Vancouver. Sunshine and 7 is on tap for Calgary tomorrow. Edmonton will be mainly sunny and 8. Just a few clouds and 5 for Regina. Mainly sunny and 5 as well for Saskatoon. Clearing and +1 for Winnipeg. Showers and 7 degrees for Toronto. Ottawa will also see periods of rain and 7. Montreal will have light showers and 7 degrees on Thursday. Expect sun mixed with cloud and 8 degrees in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Mainly sunny and 3 degrees for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Sunshine and 5 is on tap for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect lots of sunshine and a high of +1 for tomorrow. A senior Royal Bank economist says the latest report on Canada's trade deficit provides a little bit of encouragement. Stats Canada says the merchandise trade deficit declined to $4.2 billion in January. That's a revised outlook from $4.8 billion in December. It was mainly due to the strength of higher crude export prices. Exports were up 2.9% to $47.6 billion. That's the first increase since last July. Imports were up 1.5% to a record $51.8 billion. RBC economist Josh Nye says Canadian exporters are still facing a softening global industrial sector and slower global trade growth. China says its decision to suspend canola seed imports from a second major Canadian company was scientific and reasonable. The move is widely seen as retaliation for Canada's arrest last year of a top Huawei executive. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson says Viterra's license to import canola seeds was suspended after hazardous organisms were allegedly found in its shipments. Southwest Airlines says the U.S. government's grounding of all Boeing MAX 8 jets will contribute to a loss of $150 million U.S. revenue in the first quarter. The airline says it had to cancel 2,800 flights due to the groundings. Boeing and Southwest operate the largest fleet of planes. Nearly every country in the world, including Canada, ordered all MAX 8 planes grounded after 157 people died in the Ethiopian Airlines crash. That disaster was just 4 months after another MAX 8 plane went down in Indonesia, killing all 189 people on board. The CEO of a BC seaplane company is looking to become the world's first all-electric airline, expects passengers to become more comfortable with the idea over time. Harbour Air announced a partnership with MagniX to modify its commercial fleet using a 750 horsepower electric motor. Founder and CEO Greg McDougall says consumers will be comfortable with electric planes by the time the project takes off in 3 years. He says certification will require the planes to be safer than the existing fleet, and electric motors are extremely reliable. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the owner of the trucking company involved in last April's deadly Humboldt Broncos bus crash has pleaded guilty to safety charges. A lawyer for Sukhmander Singh of the now-defunct Adesh Diol Trucking said his client pleaded guilty in a Calgary court today to 5 of the 8 charges. That adds up to $5,000 in fines. They include failing to maintain time logs for drivers, neglecting to ensure his drivers complied with safety regulations, and not having or following a written safety program. Ottawa has a plan to help farmers impacted by the Chinese embargo on Canadian canola. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Want to learn about our friend the bee? The Lethbridge Bee enthusiasts welcome everyone to a presentation by Megan Evans about bumblebees on Wednesday, March 27th at 6:30 p.m. at the Helen Schuler Nature Center. It's free to attend. For more information, email Chelsea at csherbert@gmail.com. Voice of the Martyrs Canada presents Solitary Refinement, Incredible True Stories from the Persecuted Church on Friday, March 29th at 7 p.m. at King of Kings Fellowship. Be inspired by powerful testimonies from our brothers and sisters in Christ. Admission is free, but contributions will be gratefully accepted. A reception will follow the presentation. For more details, visit vomcanada.com/touring. Come for a special celebration event called Gideon's Banquet on Friday, April 12th, beginning at 6:30 p.m. at My Victory Lethbridge, hosted by the Gideon's Lethbridge chapter. Enjoy an evening of delicious food, fellowship, live music featuring Carlin Fair and family, plus see a special screening of the powerful documentary, The Samson Project. Tickets are $25 each, and to purchase, contact Bill at 403-328-4244. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
So what happened at the Commons Ethics Committee? The Liberals apparently tried to redirect on the Jody Wilson-Raybould case. To talk more about it is Brian Lilly, one of our regular contributors. Brian, was there a little bit of smearing going on, perhaps?
Hal, there was more than smearing going on. There was an attempt to say that there's nothing more to see here. Don't worry about it. Let us move on. It's kind of like what we saw at the Justice Committee. Now, what's bizarre is that the Ethics Committee is one of the few Commons committees. There's only a few that are chaired by the opposition. And so this one is chaired by Conservative MP Bob Zimmer. Now, Bob Zimmer had said, okay, you want to bring this investigation forward? We'll listen to you. And I sat there listening on Tuesday afternoon for more than an hour as Conservative MP after NDP MP, Conservative MP, NDP MP. They went back and forth, all talking about why they needed to investigate this thing. And then the Liberals took over. And the Liberal who was doing most of the talking for the party is the vice chair of the committee. He's a guy named Nathaniel Erskine Smith, Toronto area MP. He's known for being a bit of a maverick. And the very morning of the committee meeting, he penned an op-ed in a Toronto newspaper saying, you know what, outside of confidence motions, outside of certain things, Liberal MPs should be able to do what they want. They should be free. They should be independent. And then he did exactly what the Prime Minister's office wanted. he ended up helping to shut down the ethics committee, saying, well, justice is still looking into this. Now, the Justice Committee has said, we don't need to hear any more witnesses. Sure, Jody Wilson-Raybould has said she wants to submit written testimony to the committee, including text messages and emails, but she won't get to appear again. The Ethics Committee said, look, we've had Michael Wernick and Jerry Butts rebut her testimony. We need to hear from her again. And the Liberals said, no, we don't really. Compare that to Donald Trump, who, for all his belly aching about the Mueller investigation, allowed it to happen. Justin Trudeau has shut down, any chance of investigation at every turn.
So Justin Trudeau commented on the issue again this week and made comment as well on whether Wilson-Raybould and Philpott can run again as Liberals are heading into the federal election in October. What did Trudeau have to say?
Well, if you listen to Justin Trudeau, he'll let Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott run as Liberals in the October 2019 election. But, were he to kick them out at this point, I think that he would turn them into martyrs of some kind. The public believes these women over the Prime Minister by a ratio of 2 to 1. So if he kicks them out and says, you can't run as Liberals, we don't want you in the Liberal Party anymore, and we're going to stop you from testifying, well, the Canadian public might believe them over the Prime Minister by a ratio of 4 to 1, 5 to 1? This is not going well for the Prime Minister, and that's the only reason that Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are still in the Liberal caucus. Not because Justin Trudeau wants them in there, but he knows that if he were to kick them out, it would be worse for him than were he to leave them inside, where they can continue to take shots at him.
Brian, the CEO of SNC-Lavalin, dropped a bombshell recently saying it was never about the 9,000 jobs that could potentially have been lost. Trudeau says it was. What should Canadians really make of this now?
So it was a bit of a bizarre scene last week. It was late last week. Neil Bruce, the CEO of the company, who the Prime Minister has cited, we can't let this company face prosecution. We'll lose 9,000 jobs in Canada. Jerry Butts said the same thing in testimony. Michael Wernick, the soon-to-be retired clerk of the Privy Council, said the same thing. And they all kept citing this, we'll lose 9,000 jobs if we allow this company to be prosecuted. And then late last week, Neil Bruce, CEO of the company, goes on with B&M Bloomberg. He's doing an interview with, like the Business Channel, right? So he's the business guy talking to the Business Channel, and he's like, well, I don't know what they're talking about. We never threatened to lose all these jobs. And by the way, they're very skilled people, and they're going to keep their jobs. Maybe someone else will employ them, but they're highly skilled engineers, they're highly skilled construction workers. They will still be employed. All right, so the CEO talks to the Business Channel and says, don't worry about it, it's all good. Well, this week, the company had to come out and say, he didn't threaten that the jobs would be lost, but he did say that some could be lost. Now, if we go back to the original comments of Neil Bruce, the CEO of SNC-Lavalin, he said there might be some jobs lost at head office with the executives, with the administrators. But again, you go back to his main comments, the construction workers, the engineers, the main people that everyone's worried about, they would be picked up by somebody else, he said. And I think that comment remains true. So this claim by the Trudeau government that if you don't, cut these guys a deal, they're going to take 9,000 jobs away with them, completely untrue.
Brian, the diplomatic tensions continue between Canada and China. First, the Chinese blocked canola from Winnipeg-based Richardson International. Now they've said no to canola from Regina. So what are the feds doing to maybe find a solution to the canola crisis?
Well, Justin Trudeau is now, he was in Winnipeg on Tuesday talking about how he's going to sit down with Hartley Richardson from Richardson's International, but that was the same day that they announced Viterra out of Regina. It used to be, Pool. You remember Co-op and Pool? Yeah, that's what became of what turned into Viterra. So they have said that they're going to block Viterra and Richardson's, and they're not going to allow either one of them to export canola into China. That has to be incredibly problematic for not only the companies, but for Canada itself. 75% of all canola grown in Canada is for the export market, and China is the biggest importer of canola. It's not the United States, it's China. They're blocking it now. So this has to be hugely problematic for the government. We've got about 46,000 farmers growing canola, 250,000 direct and indirect jobs related to this. This makes the possibility of losing SNC-Lavalin look like a Sunday picnic. I mean, there's no comparison at all. And yet, all Justin Trudeau is saying, well, we may send a high-level delegation to Beijing to talk to them about this. Yet we know that this is politically motivated, that this is about the arrest of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou back in December. This is all about that. It's all related. China does not do politics and business separately. They do them together, and we are now being punished over the arrest of Huawei's CFO.
It appears as though the trade fight with China is being portrayed as a proxy war for the arrest of Huawei CFO back in December. Are people in the know backing up that idea?
Oh, lots of them. Lots of people are just looking at this and saying, this is nothing more than China saying, all right, you took out our person, we will take out your economy. We will impose pressure on you. We will impose economic sanctions on you. We will do whatever we can to make you cry uncle. That's essentially what they're doing. I mean, do you remember playing arm wrestling or, any type of match with your older relatives when you were younger, and they'd say, we'll make you cry uncle? That's what China is trying to do right now. They're trying to make Canada cry uncle. So this is not about, is there an actual problem with the product? As we've discussed before, Hal, China has at times acted in a protectionist measure to protect their own rapeseed industry. So rapeseed is what we used to produce here in Canada. Then we changed it. We made it much more palatable, both in terms of the name, but also how it tastes, and came up with canola. Well, consumers like canola because it's less harsh than rapeseed oil. Rapeseed is what they have in China. They're not able to produce canola on the same quality that we have. And so the consumers want that. At times they have played the protectionist game, but in this case, this is specifically tied to Huawei. They have never gone this big and this hard to protect their own industry. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the ability to produce what we can give them. This is about politics. This is not about economics. This is not about consumer safety. This is all about politics.
China is not our only trade fight. What's the latest with the U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum? Is the new NAFTA perhaps in jeopardy?
Well, Chrystia Freeland was making comments to that effect earlier this week. On Monday, she was talking about how, do we really want to be ratifying the new NAFTA, the new USMCA, as Donald Trump wants to call it, and make us all dance like we're the village people? She was saying, do we want to actually ratify this if the United States won't lift tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum? Here's my problem with this, is that the government is known for more than a year, probably more than a year and a half now, actually coming up on 2 years now, that the U.S. main problem was that we would not actually deal with the effect of China dumping steel into Canada. We would then give a polish, we would put a stamp on it, and then send it to the Americans and claim it was Canadian steel. We still haven't dealt with that issue, despite almost 2 years of the Americans saying, we don't want Chinese steel being dumped into into the United States via Canada or Mexico, claiming that it's your steel. Because if they come in via Canada or Mexico, then it's duty-free. But, we're allowing this steel to come in and then be shipped to the U.S. We haven't dealt with that still. So that's why we have these security tariffs on us. There's a bit of pomposity on both sides, both on the Americans and the Canadians, trying to claim, oh, how dare you? How could you? No, both sides need to sit down and deal with this issue seriously. I'm not sure either side wants to.
Omar Khadr is a free man now and can travel anywhere he wants in the world. Brian, some are a little concerned, however, that he may use some of that $10.5 million worth of taxpayers' money to give to his sister, the same sister who celebrated the 9/11 attacks.
Well, you know, I don't know if he's given any of the money to his sister. He's had the money for some time now. We do know that he spent $3 million buying a mini mall in the Edmonton area. And from what I understand, he overpaid. So, you know, from what I've heard, the mini mall is worth less than $2 million. He paid $3 million in cash. Maybe he overpaid. Maybe he's being foolish with his money. Also hearing that his lawyer, Dennis Edney, may have been paid off quite well. Look, we don't know what Omar Khadr is going to be doing with his money, but the fact that he's a free man probably shouldn't surprise anyone. Will it anger a lot of people, including myself? Absolutely. But this guy has been one of the most successful litigants in Canadian legal history. Every time, since he came back to Canada, every time he goes before the courts, Hal, the guy gets what he wants. So is it a reflection of the fact that there were flaws in the American judicial process that convicted him? Or is it that Canadian judges are way too lenient on people that confess to being terrorists? I'm guessing that it's probably a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, that there are both factors at play here. I'm not happy about it. I'm sure that most of your audience is not happy about it. But at this point, after Omar Khadr has won case after case after case, I'm no longer surprised.
Brian, two polls of who is popular and who is not when it comes to Canada's premiers. Scott Moe in Saskatchewan is among the most popular, but Rachel Notley here in Alberta and Doug Ford in Ontario, not quite as popular.
Yeah, well, you know, in the one poll from Dart Insights, Rachel Notley got a bump up just ahead of the election. Their poll was conducted just before the election was called, and she got a bump, but only to 38% approval. You know, that's the high watermark for Doug Ford in Ontario. You know, Angus Reid has him at 38%. The Dart Insight poll has him at 34%. The only premier that wants to be happy right now is pretty much Scott Moe. Scott Moe's going up the way. Francois Legault in Quebec is also above 50% in both polls, but so is John Horgan, but of British Columbia, but just barely. But Scott Moe's the only one that's going up. He went up from 52% when he was first elected to 59%, and the rest of them are on their way down. The one premier you don't want to be right now, Hal, is Stephen McNeil from Nova Scotia. The man who was basically seemed like the Maytag repairman. Everyone loved him. Everyone waited on him. He's now at 24% support, 24% approval rating. Nobody wants to be that low. The only person I've seen worse than that was Kathleen Wynne here in Ontario, and we know what happened.
And let's see what's going to happen with the Alberta provincial election coming up April 16th, and with Rachel Notley. Award-winning journalist Brian Lilly joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
What causes stress in your life? Is it your job? Maybe your kids, your marriage, noisy neighbors, maybe when your hockey team doesn't win? Mm-hmm. The next gentleman who's joining me at the desk has a lot of experience when it comes to stress and helping people deal with stress. His name is Gordon College. He's a certified life coach practitioner, marriage and family mediator. He's also a former instructor in family studies at Lethbridge Community College. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Good, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Gord, you and I actually go back about 30 years. We worked together at a Vernon radio station like a lifetime ago, about 30 years ago. Incredible.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? And that's part of what I've lived my life to reduce my own stress is by choosing different careers. I've had 3 or 4 of them since I was in the broadcast business.
And there's no stress at all in TV and radio news, not at all, right?
I mean, you can sit and watch television all day until you work for 5 hours, for 5 minutes, or whatever the length of time is. No, it's yes, it's amazing just what can cause us stress and set us off.
How would you define stress?
Stress, to define it, would be to, it's a multifaceted thing. That's why it's not a slick answer that I can give you, but in multifaceted, it could come from trying to open up a jar of pickled herring. It can come from trying to tear the hide off an orange. Could be somebody that left something on the carpet and you stepped on that Lego piece.
Right. I've done that a few times.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is, you know, sometimes it's just pure life and living, but it's how we react and respond to those issues, how we learned to, and we can pursue that, because a lot of times we're just programmed, just conditioned to respond in certain ways, and that can add to our stress. So
how would you differentiate then, Gord, between stress or maybe just being a little concerned about something?
Well, you know, I suppose it's in the longevity of it. For instance, some people, when they're just concerned, they may voice that concern. And that is the proper way. They need to express that concern to an individual that they trust and that can do something about it. See, we get, too many times it's the other way, and we end up getting cranky and upset over things we have absolutely no control over. A person could say, the wind, you know, I just hate that wind blowing around here.
The sun is in my eyes.
And stuff like that,
Sure,
see?
yeah.
And that is just bellyache, right? And it's a useless conversation, and we should just work at getting rid of that method of expression, so that you've got an idea of being with certain people or coming into certain circumstances where you want to be able to have a positive encounter. See, sometimes it really gets us when people are not trying hard enough to make some changes in their life.
So maybe we have to cut some of those toxic, negative people out of our lives who are causing us stress. I'm not talking about family members, because your family's with you till the day you die, obviously. But maybe your circle of friends. You need better friends, more of a support system.
Yeah. You know, and the way you can have fun experimenting with that is that you become very positive, conscious, positive. And so that you may walk into, if it's in a work setting or a classroom setting or wherever it is, you walk in there and say, I feel so good today. This is tremendous. Or look at that neat thing. And we stay in the positive. If you don't stay in the positive, or if you do stay in the positive, you will annoy a lot of people, and people are very uncomfortable when you're too positive and you're always walking around with a smile on your face. They just want to know what you're up to, and they're making all kinds of suggestions. That's an indication of how we've allowed ourselves to drift in our culture, and we get ourselves in a real bind. You know, another way sometimes is, you know how people say, "Hi, how are you?" And I think we need to answer that. But many times we go, "Yep, good." We don't say too much more. Why? Because that person...
They just keep walking.
Yeah, they keep walking because they know that if they... You see, and I have just feigned an injury. Sometimes I would... people say, "Well, Gord, how are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I am so glad you asked. I got a pain in my elbow and it goes up to my shoulder."
They'll say, "That's nice."
Yeah, and you watch them start to backpedal, and they'll, "Hey, we should get together." "Yeah, and we should get together. Maybe we could talk about this sometime." Right. They don't want any part of that, unless you've got a very unusual associate. So what happens is that we get ourselves in, and we get complaining, and we're just generally negative. And it can happen in the time it takes you to put your socks on in the morning, is that you can go from being pretty good to just frustrated, particularly if you got the sock sideways and something like that, and You know, it's when we do the research on these areas, it becomes really, really important that we do something in the positive way and rid ourselves of that negative association.
So life often throws us curveballs, Gord. How do we deal with those curveballs that we can hit them out of the park?
Yeah, oh, that's a neat way of putting it. You know, perhaps it's still the same thing. It's how we react and respond to it. And again, some people internalize so that they just got that nasty phone call, or they just got something that's got them off their game plan. And so when that occurs, they'll take it in and they brood on it, ruminate on it, go round and round and over. And each time they do that, they move closer to becoming quite irritated, quite upset, because it's coming through their fear. You know, you could take anger apart, and it's fear, hurt, frustration, and anxiety. And if we can nail those things down and find out what's at the root there, oftentimes when I'm sitting with people and just discussing their situation, you know, it just comes out that there's a deep-seated fear. And they become so upset with it because they've been brooding on it, that then you ask them, well, what can I do? Nothing. Yeah, nobody can do anything. So the irritation, the frustration, the bitter talk just really starts to get us. And you see, so we end up creating our own problem. Every time something changes, we experience a stress response or reaction.
Now, some people say technology is very positive because it helps us in our daily lives, keeping in touch with our kids or grandkids, helps us at work. Technology, computers, the internet, our cell phones.
Yeah.
But they can also cause a little bit of stress as well, can't they, technology?
Oh, absolutely. Because even for in the upper demographic, they're used to actually just a couple of channels of television. And so now they get punching with their, and they hit some button and they're, you know, and then they have to phone the television company to reset it. Those things get it. We also, you know, in discovering people had a certain upbringing that the more buttons to push, the more things that can go wrong.
Right.
And so they stand back from it all, and trying to get Skype going or doing face-to-face or something like that is such a challenge for people.
You know, it's interesting, Gordon. I'm glad you brought that up because I have a family member. I don't want to say who, but this family member bought a newer vehicle, and this family member covered up with tape a lot of the buttons and a lot of the.
Well, there you go.
This person really didn't need on the vehicle. It's like I've got my speedometer. I know where to put it in drive, where the radio is, the heater. That's all I want, right?
Yeah, exactly. The same thing with the cell phone. And we realized we had to get out of the flip phone, so then we go to the smartphone, and all the time, if you stand in a store listening to the exchanges between people and the clerks in there, they'll say something. I just want to be able to say hello on phone and just get my message, and oh, I like that texty thing. I like that, but my fat fingers, I can't get going here. See, so it's yin and yang, the way that we struggle sometimes with that. And again, it comes back to saying, all right, what really is getting to me, and what can I do about it? So much of it, Hal, has to do with our programming, just the attitude that we have got, and how quickly we flare when something doesn't work the way we think, because I'm not reading that whole book on the manual. That's right. You know, I'm not. Don't want to have anything to do with that. I just want to be able to do this and do that. And hello, and yes, and so Yeah. We understand.
What kind of relationships cause us stress? I mean, a lot of times it's family members, maybe in our marriage or our kids, sometimes our coworkers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Sometimes the closer the relationship, like a spouse is, and a parent or children, all of them, there's can be some real change, a real stress there. My brain's getting ahead of me a little bit, and I see if we go back to thinking that anything that changes creates a stress reaction in me, and so I have to learn to be okay with things that change. You know, we talk about an old saying used to be like, I can just spin on a dime. I can just wheel around and go this way. Sure. Okay, if this doesn't work, I've got 4 more where that idea came from. And those are very vibrant people, but man, they're not stress-free. These are your type A that are so driven and compulsive and just show it to me, and I could just, I could repaint the studio between coffee breaks.
That's impressive, by the way.
Yeah, it would be. But nothing holds them back. But with family, with spouse, children, they start changing. Change a hairstyle, change and challenge you a little bit why they can't wear that T-shirt. And back and forth it goes, and we sometimes are becoming increasingly inflexible now, and the more inflexible we become, the more stress that we put on ourselves and others.
So Gord, bottom line is, how can we handle and deal with the stress that's best for us and our families? Maybe start meditating on God's word and in prayer?
That would be an awesome beginning, because there are so many examples in Scripture of Christ didn't heal everybody. He didn't even stop to talk to everybody. And yet there's some people that they're just going out of their way to make sure everybody is done. They end up with either the Messiah complex, or you can have the Martha complex. And look at how fussed up those sisters got. And one in the kitchen and just getting everything done, and the other one lounging in the living room listening to the master, right? Those stories are just so fascinating and appropriate that we can make all kinds of changes in how we behave. It is very much a behavioral problem. And we take a look at how I got this far. Like if I'm opening up a drawer and it doesn't come all the way open, what do? I keep pulling on it.
Well, you put your foot into it, or maybe
I
your shoulder
would
into it.
anything, see, because, but I got a pretty good idea who messed that drawer up. and all of that is flashing through a person's brain in no time at all. Well, we call it inappropriate behavior or whatever, but it's just plain silly. It does no good. And people say, well, it's just the way I am. Yes, it's the way you are right now. But with conscious effort, you can change big time. You don't need to get flaring and upset. And if that piece of Lego in the carpet it doesn't call for any attack on the child that might have dropped it in there. I mean, I really would love to see a cleanup in human behavior where people become a little more courteous, a little bit more kind. There's all kinds of good things that we can do without getting ourselves all fussed up and frustrated by everything that's going on.
Absolutely. Gord College, certified life coach, practitioner, marriage and family mediator. Thanks a lot for joining me here today in studio at Bridge City News.
It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.